I'm Isabella Cantu. Welcome to Synarchy. Here I explore the emergence of the new earth. Because beyond the troubling news headlines, many believe is a shift in consciousness, where humanity is alchemizing its collective and individual shadow to usher in a new paradigm. Join me as I investigate this by sitting down with the people whose work I believe is at the forefront of this transformation, to answer the question, what should I be doing to help build a new earth? Today, I'm really happy to welcome Roland Torikian, renowned Maya medicine healer, whose work beautifully bridges the wisdom of the Maya and Tibetan traditions through meditation and ceremony. Roland's approach weaves a range of techniques, including egg and pulse diagnosis, energy healing, talking therapy, abdominal massage, and dream work. These practices help to open pathways for deep processing of ancestral and karmic trauma, which is often at the root of psycho-emotional and physical symptoms. Roland has over 30 years of experience as a healer, having trained with Lauro Dela Cruz in Chiapas, Mexico. Lauro is a Maya medicine man and sage who is still active today. He is esteemed and renowned for his spiritual teachings and healing practices. After training in Mexico, Roland studied Tibetan Buddhist philosophy in Dharamshala, India, and today he brings these two worlds together, offering ceremonies, retreats, and healing work that support deep transformation of body, mind, and spirit. I've had the honor of working with him through his sweat lodge retreats and one-on-one therapy sessions, the combination of which has been instrumental in my personal healing journey and evolution as a human being. So, Roland, I'm so happy you're here. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Isabella. It's a great joy to be here today to talk to you.
I'm so excited to have you as my first guest on the podcast, given that we've worked together, and I'm just excited to share what your work is, and hopefully it'll reach the right people. So I want to go straight into it and ask you to explain what your work is, and how it can help people find lasting change in their lives.
So it's quite a big question, because I think the work encompasses quite a broad church in a sense. And I was thinking about this recently, and it took me back to my initiation in Chiapas in 1995, when I'd met Lauro, and we were building the healing center together outside of San Cristobal de las Casas. And it was a few days before my sort of initiation ceremony, and I went up into the forest and had some time to think about what I was doing there and why I was there and what my intentions were. And I think actually one of the things that came to me in that moment was I wanted to protect the natural world. I wanted to protect the plants and the animals and the spirits and guardians that look after the natural world. And I wanted to be a bridge, I think, between the human world and the spirit world, and try and find a way to bring the humans back into a place where they're more in tune with the earth that they live on and the environments they live in and the energies that are here on this planet that maybe we don't see, maybe we don't have relationships with that are conventional. But I think this relationship that we have between ourselves and all the non-physical beings in the natural world, it's really important. And I think healing has to involve a wider conversation between ourselves and all the other beings that are inhabiting this planet, not just the physical ones, the plants, the animals, etc., but also the deities that protect the natural world, the ancestors, and all of the beings that live in the non-physical realm that preside over this space energetically. So I think that was one of my first intentions, really, to want to be a part of that dialogue, and obviously seeing the state of the world at the time. I felt, I wanted to do something about it, and obviously, seeing the suffering around me and within me, I wanted to do something about that. And I was very fortunate at that time in my life to have been in that place with those people, in that environment of healing and traditional medicines, and ceremonies, and meeting amazing people who, like me, were kind of not outcasts in their societies, but they were outsiders, very much outsiders, trying to bridge the gap, between their world and other worlds. So I think that was my starting point when I went to Mexico, in terms of entering that culture and that language and that magic and that medicine. So from there, obviously, my experiences in Chiapas, and then took me to India and other places, and I discovered, in fact, in the Tibetan culture, the same things really were operating in terms of the medicine being based on balance and the 5 elements, the spiritual path also being based on the same principles of loving kindness, compassion, care for one's environment, one's family, one's world, and the relationship between the physical world, human world, and the non-physical world, extremely important. And obviously, the Tibetans and the Mayans have very different cultures, but the roots are the same, and the techniques are different, the vocabulary is different, but they're all coming from the same kind of place, really. This ancient knowledge that has a deep understanding of, how to relate to these non-physical realms of existence. Health and disease are understood in the much broader context of the holistic health of our environments, our planet, not just the individual. I mean, the individual represents the wider cosmos, and also the wider cosmos is reflected in the individual struggles. And also, both cultures, are very ancient. So these are tried and tested practices that have been refined and purified for thousands of years. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but that gives a broad understanding of sort of what the work is and where it's coming from.
No, it does answer the question, and actually, it makes me think of what is perhaps the biggest misconception that people have around healing, because you talked about how you want to bridge, like there's a disconnect that people have towards the unseen realm and even just nature. Um, yeah, what is the biggest misconception when it comes to healing?
Well, what are we healing? Who are we healing? According to the Tibetans, we're all born sick. Whether we're actually manifesting any physical conditions or symptoms due to our previous kind of incarnations and experiences. So in a world, we all come into this world to heal, right? And we bring with us our ancestral wounds, our karmic seeds. We can see these being played out very early in our lives, in our early family dynamics, in our emotional states of being, in our behavior. So I believe that, we all come to this world to heal. and to grow and to learn and to evolve. And I feel like life is an evolution for us all to grow into the full version of ourselves, to fulfill our potential in this life, to bring about, as I said, a higher state of consciousness in which we care for one another, we care for the beings of this planet, we care how to conserve and protect this world rather than consume and destroy. So the misconceptions around healing maybe come from, short-sightedness, perhaps, in thinking that this is, a small journey. It's this extremely long journey. Healing takes a lifetime. It's incredibly arduous and requires a lot of commitment and dedication and love. And it requires one to go deep into one's shadow self and into one's trauma, into one's family trauma, deep into one's psyche, one's dreams, one's physical body. And one has to really cultivate a practice that's going to enable one to heal. Because unless we can heal at every level, physical, emotional, psychic, energetic, family, community, societal level, then it's not a complete job. And so it takes a huge amount of love and patience. And as you know, there are many setbacks along the road, right? There are many obstacles that we have to overcome. And with each challenge and obstacle, we have to develop more efficient ways of working with the obstacles and with ourselves. So when people come and see me and they say, oh, how many sessions? It's a bit of a joke, right? Or how long will this take? Because I don't know. And neither do they. We don't know. We don't know what's around the corner. And also, we don't know what deep unconscious forces are necessarily sitting way beneath the construction of our own personalities and our own ego nature. We don't know what will come. So if we don't know what we're dealing with, how can we know, how we're going to deal with that, or how we're going to feel about facing a part of ourselves we didn't even know existed? So I'd say the biggest misconception would be that, healing is something that, it's going to be a short time frame and will involve just oneself.
Do you think that because this disconnect that we have with the unseen realms, with nature, ourselves, this path of sort of coming from either not knowing or not remembering, is it the whole point why we're even on Earth, do you think? Is this what some people call a boot camp for the soul, that we incarnate into the third dimension or on planet Earth to learn these things and to go through these difficulties and sort of remember from a state of not remembering?
Very much so. Yes, absolutely. If we can recognize our true nature, if we can remember who we were, if we can connect with who we are in the true sense, and let go of all the false narratives and the false identities of who we think we are, which are extremely misleading, then that certainly empowers us to, to live a life that, is meaningful and purposeful, and it includes, as Rumi says, God is pleased when your life becomes part of something universal. That that connection that we have with ourselves and our fellow beings, in whatever dimension they are, is fundamental to remembering who we are and why we're here.
So why do you think in the West in particular, and we are so disconnected from that part of us? Where are we finding ourselves here at this point in our evolution as humans?
Well, I think human beings always tend to go to the extreme of their experience. We have a shadow self. We have a self-destructive side to our human nature, and throughout history, we can see human beings have struggled to make friends with themselves, make friends with one another, their neighbors, all the division in the world that's here today is probably always been here because, as Jung said, the individual is at war with himself, is at conflict with himself. And while he is, so will the world be. And I think throughout time and with the rise of rationalism, science, technology, consumerism, capitalism, all these things, all of these more recent phenomenon, they have created a bigger divide, a bigger wedge between the true connection of who we are to the ways in which we live and relate to one another. So I think we've lost a lot of agency. We've lost a lot of soul, right? We've lost a lot of connection, a lot of rootedness, a lot of community, a lot of understanding of, the importance of, I would say, the basic fundamentals of life, how to protect, take care of ourselves and one another, and to empower ourselves to evolve into the, as I said, the full versions of ourselves that we've come here to become. And rationalism has obviously helped science progress, but it's also been a cause for a lot of disconnection as we've moved up more into the rational brain and the thinking brain and the analytical brain. We've moved away, I think, from the heart center, from the emotional center, from the navel center, the female center, and we've become really very imbalanced in terms of the energy distribution in our physical bodies, so that we're sort of almost like thinking brains stuck onto a kind of obsolete body in a sense, and we're all in a sense tapped into the matrix, aren't we? We're all we invest so much energy into screens, into technology, into really not really connecting to our physicality, to our breath, and to nature. And also, as Jung pointed out many years ago, the drive towards rationalism, materialism, science has basically widened the gap between more of our ancestral roots, our spiritual roots, and also we have come to fear the parts of ourselves that are irrational and more mysterious, deeper, more spiritual, so that in order to almost justify the rational parts of ourselves, we have to deny the existence of absolutely anything else. So in many cases, I think we live in not just secular societies, but rational ones that deny the ability of the kind of human soul to liberate itself, and even sort of stand up and be counted. So rationalism, the advance of technology, the more technologically advanced we become, kind of more disempowered, essentially, that we are as human beings, and also the more dangerous we become, right? because 2,000 years ago, we'd be fighting with bows and arrows, and now obviously our systems of warfare are that much more advanced, aren't they? And the weapons we have are so much more lethal. So it's almost like we've removed the agency of karma, because actually it's probably somebody else. You might be giving the order, but someone else is pressing the button, right? It's a bit like the Tibetans say, well, it's worse to ask your butcher to kill animals so that you can eat them rather than you killing them yourself. So I think and also the drive of materialism and consumerism, it means that we have to spend an awful an inordinate amount of energy just to kind of like survive, right, on a material level. That the time left for spiritual practice is reduced, isn't it, to a tiny amount. Whereas I think if you want to empower yourself, you have to spend the majority of your time doing just that, and the minimum amount of time invested in material pursuits. So I think it's much harder now than it was.
For many people, in my at least circles, it's becoming more and more unbearable to see how polarized the world is becoming. For people who I think at varying degrees are working on themselves and are still connected to that humanity, it's becoming really unbearable. Do you think that paradoxically, the darker the times, the closer we are to a leap?
Well, absolutely. I mean, the leaders, it is said that we deserve the leaders that we elect, right? And they are also products of our societies. And through history, if you look at the historical leaders from Napoleon and to Hitler to Mussolini, they're not nice people. And when we look around today, are they any different? No, they're not. They just got bigger bombs. But I do agree with you that division and polarization in today's world is deeply alarming. And at the same time, as you say, an opportunity to really, we really have to make those quantum leaps now, because those old orders are really crumbling, I think, and politicians are not going to save us, and our leaders are not going to save us. We have to save ourselves, essentially. So in order to do that, yes, we have to make all kinds of quantum leaps. So there is opportunity in crisis, and essentially at any moment in our lives, we can choose to wake up, right, and make those changes that we feel are important for our world and ourselves.
So, do you think it is especially important for people to work on themselves at this time? And is working on ourselves actually benefiting the collective?
Absolutely. I mean, the thing is, we can't work on anyone else, can we? So we can only work on ourselves, and we can only improve the state of mind of the world by working on our own state of mind. I think the Maharishi in the 60s talked about trying to get a certain percentage of the world to meditate in order to bring the world into a great state of peaceful mindedness. So I think we can only work on ourselves. And obviously, if enough of us work on ourselves, then we will cultivate a world in which there is more tolerance, there is more compassion, there is more communication, there is more attention to care for our planet and consideration for others who are not of the same race or gender or sexual orientation or or religion. Um, we're all human beings, right? And we all have, as I said, a shadow side. And as Chogyam Trungpa said, drive all blames into one, which means stop blaming anything outside of yourself, because for as long as you're doing that, you're not taking ownership of what's troubling you, of where you're sick, or where your mind is negatively engaging with itself or with the world. So we absolutely need to work on ourselves continuously every day and every night and through our dreams and the rest of it, to bring about collective change.
I'll take this opportunity to invite you to explain into more detail how the sweat lodges or temazcals work for those who have never tried them. What happens when you enter into a lodge, and why can it be so helpful to really go even deeper than you could ever go with talk therapy, at least in my opinion? Because it really feels like when you're in the lodge, at least when I'm in the lodge with you, all of the other people, it really feels like you're escorting us into the underworld and through a process of dying, like a death. Really, I can only describe it as.
I think the ceremonies that are held in a sacred and loving space, whatever they are, I think help us again connect to the Buddha nature, the basic goodness of who we are, and draw us closer to all beings. Um, and the sweat lodge is a great example of one type of ceremony that has been practiced for thousands of years, that allows us to literally go back into the earth and, um, as you say, enter into the underworld, into a non-physical space where we can talk to our ancestors, and we can very easily communicate with the non-physical beings. And as you say, have the experience of dying, because essentially most fears are the fear of death, right? Wrapped up in something else. So if we can face our death with a sense of joyfulness and openness, then the chances are we'll be able to face life and the challenges that go along with it with more love and compassion and kind of strength, and sort of cutting through wisdom. And so, as you know, the space of the lodge is dark and represents the female space of the womb, and the light of the ancestors or the rocks illuminate the darkness of the cave, and we bring the male and the female energies into a state of union, and deeply descend, if you like, into a non-physical space within us, where we can begin to kind of open out emotionally and energetically, to discover, what are the forces within us that are really operating here. If we're really connecting, how strongly are we connecting to the ancestors? How strongly are we connecting to our karmic patterning? How strongly are we connected to all the other beings in this planet? How strongly are we connected to our own fear, to our own judgment, to our own pain? And how can we work through that? And I think the process of being willing to kill the ego, right? That is the process of dying that we're involved with, to kill the name and form and the identities and all the constructs of ego, all the defense systems, all the barriers that we throw up to keep others away from us, and to keep ourselves locked into our own kind of pain and delusions. So the darkness of the lodge represents our own darkness, and through the rounds and the songs and prayers and the meditations, we try and find a way to process through our human experience so that we're able to process and transmute the toxic element, the wounded element, the judgment, the fear, the pain, the ancestral trauma, so that we come out the other side feeling a sense of openness and a kind of sense of workability, like we don't have to be perfect here, but we can work with the totality of our experience, our emotion and our emotional content, our physicality, our neurosis. As you mentioned, that the divisiveness and the polarities in the world, like we have to be willing to embrace the totality of life and not just pick and choose the bits that we like, right? Because sooner or later we're going to have to be forced to confront them anyway. So going into the lodge, it's like you're going into the room 101. You're going into the place that you don't want to go into because you've been avoiding it. And when you open up room 101, all your fears are there waiting for you. And we, as you know, we see how we get on. How we're going to handle that situation.
I'd like you to speak a little more to the role of heat, because I'd like to clarify that in sweat lodges there is no use, at least the ones you run, there's no use of plant medicine. So we achieve these deep states through meditation, through breath work, and through heat, because it is physiologically, it feels like a really hot sauna in really layman's terms. So what is the role of heat in taking you there?
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's really important to look at the role of the five elements here, because we're sitting on the ground, connecting with the underworld and the ancestors. We're um, pouring on the rocks, the water, and um, discovering our kind of water nature through the steam and the flow of energy. We're then bringing in the rocks and the element of fire, which is all about the sort of upward moving prana and the kind of the warmth and the compassion of the fire element, the fire goddess. And then we're breathing and we're inviting in the wind goddess, and then we're kind of opening our hearts into the space element. So I think it's very important to understand the fire element just as in conjunction with all the others, because it's not the most important thing there. It's one of the elements, right? And if you take away any of those elements, then the other ones, it's like they don't know what to do with themselves. It's quite interesting. Oh, we did a sweat lodge ceremony recently, and the first round wasn't actually very warm, and it just felt really odd. It felt really strange. It felt like something was missing, but then it allowed an opportunity for something else to happen. So it's really interesting how these elements all work together. But the heat itself, the fire is the kind of represents the life force energy, the kind of volcanic nature of life. And it's that uplifting, joyful, creative, heartwarming energy that I feel at first, it relaxes you, it helps you open, it helps you soften. I think the Finnish embassy in London, I think they have a sauna, and they invite in all the diplomats to hang out and talk politics in a sauna, right? Why? Because they're more relaxed, So I think this is wonderful, and it's interesting to see the rise in sauna um, use in the UK and certainly across Europe. But we've been saunaing, we've been sweat lodging for thousands of years, haven't we? In our different modalities, and I think so. So the heat opens and relaxes, and then beyond that, when it gets, as you know, some rounds, we're getting beyond a level of relaxing and sitting around, you know, feeling comfortable within the heat. Then it gets to a point when the heat becomes uncomfortable, and then the heat is a very driving agent towards helping us go into the uncomfortable world of really feeling our emotions, or really going into room 101, facing our fears, or really actually going into a place that we don't want to go to, because the heat is sort of driving us into that place. But also the fire is a great purifier, right? And transformer. So through the heat and the breath and the emotional content and the openness, and the heat has a sort of catalytic, transformative role in helping one actually process and purify emotion and energy that's stuck deeply in the body, or the energetic system, or the subtle body. In the Mayan tradition of the highlands, the role of the heat in the Temazcal is vital, because it's seen as the way to drive out the cold winds that are trapped in the body. So fire has many functions. Heat has many functions in the lodge. They're just a few of them.
There's also space. Obviously, it's one of the elements, but also goddess, you
Yeah.
refer to goddess of space. What is its importance?
Well, space is, well, the goddess of space. She's seen as the queen of the elements, because she gives birth to everything, and we're all born into this great emptiness and dissolve back into it. And whatever the manifestations of life, whatever the forms, everything returns back to the great emptiness, right? The great sky mother. So apart from providing a physical space for the world to exist in, it also allows us to expand and open emotionally, energetically, and to realize that we're not these, physical, tangible beings, that we're actually beings of space, aren't we? And light and energy. And that through unbound space, infinite wisdom, dynamic energy, we're able to kind of express ourselves in this existence, not through our physicality or our form, but through our energetic expression of who we are. So space allows us to grow and open and discover our true nature.
Would you say, if you were to recommend to people how to work with these elements outside of the lodge, and I ask this actually specifically, and I'll say it out loud, because I have a friend who believes that they have too much fire in them, therefore working in a temazcal would not be suited for them. But I remember you said in the lodge last time that perhaps where there is this resistance, maybe that's the medicine that you need.
Yeah, it's interesting. So the resistance is always pointing to the place that needs your love, right? If you feel a great amount of resistance between yourself and your mother, for example, then it will point towards an opening, a conversation that you want to be having with your mother, right? So again, it's very, very interesting to see where people's resistances are, and they're all very different. So some people will come and they won't touch the river, they won't even look at it. And if they come in February, there's no way they're getting in that river. And yet other people come and they're just straight in the river, and other people turn up. And this has happened on some occasions, that some people can't actually physically get their body into the lodge because it produces so much fear and anxiety. They have to just do the whole ceremony outside of the lodge. So obviously our resistance is a pointing to the place that we need to work, right? So in the case of how to work with the elements outside of the lodge, well, the first thing one must do is spend time in nature, right? So I would say get out into nature every day, connect to the elements, connect to your physical body, connect to the sun, the moon, the stars, the earth, connect to the rivers, the lakes, swim in the sea, in rivers and lakes, walk in the forest, climb the mountain, contact with nature, right? Because nature ultimately is the healer. And if we spend time there, we get to hang out with our healers, right? If we don't hang out in nature, where's the healing? Where's the medicine? And of course, there are practices that help us specifically connect to each element, meditations and sky gazing and focusing on the goddesses and the different chakras of the elements. So there are many, many different ways to connect to the elements. But I'd say spend time outdoors, leave your headphones and leave your phone at home. Just go out and just be there and spend time there. And nature will bring you back to yourself and help you connect with the elements within you and show you where the imbalances are. And then go to the point of, as you say, resistance or weakness. That, I don't want to jump in that cold body of water. I don't like the water. I don't like the cold. That's the best thing you can do, because it will bring out whatever it is within you that is uncomfortable and unworked and kind of, rough. And then it will give you an opportunity to, discover something about yourself that's unworked and needs your love and attention. I remember Wim Hof actually talking about when his wife committed suicide, he would go into the lake near where he lived and just go in the water and, just the cold, it took him to another place within him where there was no pain, there was no anxiety. It was just, you could deeply relax and, come back to the present moment. So that's just one example, but I think we need to do practices that will help us connect with each element in turn.
I want to talk about the dream yoga. It's an important part of your practice and something that you really sort of walk the people you work with through. So could you speak to that?
Absolutely. So we spend a third of our lives asleep, and in the Tibetan tradition, also the time that you spend asleep is not like you're going on holiday. You get to chill out. It's considered an important time to practice. So obviously, when we go to sleep, the gross body dissolves, and we into the subtle body, and then in the subtle body we can, in our dream body, we can fly. We can go and fly into the future. We can go to the past. We can change into an animal. We can go into different dimensions. So we're a lot more flexible when we dream and able to go to places that are inconceivable, right, to a normal waking rational mind. So the purpose of dream yoga is to extend the awareness of consciousness into the dream state, to transform your dream experience into a spiritual practice for self-realization. So it's developing that lucidity and flexibility means that when we're in our dream state, we can actually, transform fears and retrieve parts of ourselves that we've lost, perform healings, receive teachings. I mean, it's kind of endless, the world of dreams, right? And then sleep yoga is the practice of extending that awareness into dreamless sleep so that we can benefit from receiving the medicinal and restorative medicine from that state, when the mind is at rest, the energy is in the central channel, but we're aware of that dreamless state. So it's an extremely important part of the practice. And in the mind tradition, again, the vocabulary is different, but it's a similar kind of principle, that in our dream state, our dream body is considered, or our nawal, or our spirit, or our animal spirit, or guardian spirit, goes into the underworld and different realms, and communicates with the ancestors and other spirits, and in this state where we're able to cut through different dimensions and relate to those other beings that I mentioned before, to bridge the gap and to mend the tears between these different worlds.
So is it possible for someone to set an intention or ask for help or direction before they go to bed? And if so, how?
Well, that's actually part of the practice. It's so before we sleep, we kind of we do a preparation for the night. So we review the day and to kind of rewind, back it up, and then replay, and then find the moments that were difficult. We felt negativity, there were arguments, conflicts, and we try and cleanse our energy before we sleep, so we don't take that energy into the dream space. Then we call on the dakinas, or the protective guardians of dream, to protect us in the dream world, and then we set our intentions. So just like you would in your day, you get up and you do your meditation practice, and then maybe you make some intentions for the day. You maybe say, okay, today I'm going to try and be a little bit more kinder and loving with myself and with others. Today, maybe I'm going to spend more time in nature. Maybe today, so you set your daytime intention. So why is it any different at night? You're going somewhere, infinitely more expansive and mysterious. So if you, like we always say, if you don't know where you're going, how are you going to get there? Right? And if you don't have a direction of travel, then the karmic winds or the karmic seeds within you, they're just going to take you off into kind of samsaric dreams, where you're probably going to be just chased around the place and wake up in the morning and just be like, oh, I don't know where I went. It was terrible. So, but if you set an intention of direction of travel, like where do I want to go tonight? Who do I want to see? What work do I need to do here in this dream space? Which part of myself do I feel like I need to reconnect to? Do I need to talk to my inner child? Do I need to, revisit some parts of my life that were very painful and traumatic that I feel like I haven't processed? Do I feel like I need to connect to, my ancestors? So I think, how do we set the intentions? Just like you would for anything in your life. And then when you go into that dream state, and then in dream yoga, we meditate. And we divide the night into four 2-hour sections, and each section we meditate on a particular chakra in our body before we go to sleep, and then this helps us kind of cultivate certain types of dreams that will help us process certain kinds of emotions and energies. So I think set the intention, direction of travel, and then when we're in the dream itself, we then have to say, this is a dream. Now that I'm dreaming, I can do anything. Oh yeah, why am I here? Oh, I remember. I set the intention of why I'm here. And where am I? Well, I'm somewhere completely different. Okay. So at that point, we can lucidly, consciously move around the place as you would in your waking world. if you're walking around a city, if you've never been to Brussels, you'd be like, where am I? Oh, I don't speak the language. I don't know where I am. But you'd soon like figure out, you'd ask someone, excuse me, where's the station? And the same thing in a dream, right? You figure out where you are, what you're doing there, and what's your intention. So it's having that clarity and lucidity to help you navigate the world of dreams. As I said, as a spiritual practice, and also it might be like, okay, I would like to receive some teachings in my dream. So you turn up somewhere and you're like, oh, excuse me, where's the way to? Can you direct me to the temple? Right.
In the wisdom traditions that you have studied and that you base your practice on, is there anything around words and how we should use them thoughtfully? And, like, for instance, if we use them in a way that is speaking negativity over our lives or over ourselves,
Mm.
what is do you have anything to say to that?
I think it's extremely powerful, how we think, how we speak, um, the uh, the identities that we reinforce for ourselves and others through our language. I am sick. I am old. I am this. I can't do this. I don't have time to do that. I don't have time to meditate. You know, it, we're continually reinforcing the negative um, aspects of ourselves constantly, right? It's like some people, here they're constantly complaining. It's too hot, it's too cold, it's too wet, it's too dry. I hate this. I can't. So absolutely. And in Buddhism, we speak about, like, well, um, if you speak negatively about someone, you're just doing yourself harm, aren't you? Because you're creating an energy within you that doesn't really reflect who that person is. But you're not acknowledging your own negativity or your own shadow. So I think it's extremely important to be conscious and mindful of what we say and also how we say it, because uh, this is like the kind of the mouthpiece, isn't it, of, like, your intentions and your energy force. And also, I'm not saying that we shouldn't be negative. Of course, it's important to say no. I call it the power of the positive no. So when I'm talking about negativity, I don't mean, you know, you can't express negativity. I'm just saying that I think it's important to be aware of the words that we choose to use, so that they don't reinforce all the false identities that we carry around with us.
So when you hear people say your words are like
Mm.
spells, is it because they sort of energetically reinforce things and so they act as spells, or
Well, we're constantly constructing the realities that we live in, so that in our dream world, like, we're creating that world. In our conscious world, we're creating that world. Um, so yeah, we're continually putting spells on ourselves, aren't we? And others, and cursing ourselves and others, or blessing ourselves, depending on our intentions, the choice of words, and what kind of world we want to create.
I have a question about, given that you obviously work with a lot of different people. Uh, I have worked specifically with you. At least my intention was to really unblock certain patterns around hiding and around withholding my gifts and not sharing them with the world. What is the disservice that one does to the collective and not just to themselves when they withhold their gifts and when they hide or make themselves small?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Eric Fromm wrote a book called The Myth of Freedom, and he basically says, everyone says they want to be free, but that's not true. People want to be told what to do and how to act and the rest of it. If you give them freedom, they're like, oh, I don't know what to do with that. And it's the same thing with, empowering oneself. If you empower yourself, then you can't just, um, lie back into your sickness or your disempowerment as some kind of protective, cloak. So, unblocking yourself and coming out of hiding means that you're actually taking yourself seriously, right? And you really mean it. So if you really take yourself seriously and you really mean it, then um, you know uh, it's important that you recognize that you're actually more afraid of empowering yourself than you are of the things that are disempowering you. So I think again we're looking in the mirror constantly, aren't we? It's our light and our dark, and it's a very delicate balance of like how much I can really deal with myself on those levels, on those polarities. Um, it is so much easier to ignore, to shut down, as you say, to hide away, to make oneself smaller, because then you don't really have to confront anything. But as soon as you start making yourself bigger, and I always say to people, well, why are you occupying such a small space, physically or emotionally or with your, kind of intentions, or why do you have such like low expectations for yourself? Chogyam Trungpa called it the cocoon. It's like it's the Western sun, or the wrapping oneself in the duvets of ego to try and uh, protect oneself from oneself, right? And the darkness and the depression and all of that stuff. But when one unwraps oneself and liberates oneself and unravels all of those layers of self-protection and defense, we realize, well, there's no real reason to be hiding. And if I stop hiding and come out into the world and share my gifts, as you say, then in fact the world will benefit from me having turned up, right? If you don't show up, nobody else will, right? If you don't show up for yourself, like no one else is going to show up either. It's like the lodge, like if I don't show up, nobody else is going to come, are they?
If someone is watching this and doesn't have a daily practice for self
Mm.
development, what do you invite them to do, or where can they start?
Well, I would say start a simple kind of morning meditation practice, and just find a place in your home that's quiet, and have a space where you can just sit and breathe and let your organism be, just allow it to breathe. And um, because ultimately meditation is the best medicine for all of us, because it helps us kind of um, unravel all of these layers of emotion and thought and energy that are deeply kind of locked in the physical body. When you work with your breath, you work with your posture, you work with your breathing, your state of mind, then you allow a space in which things can be as they are, and you can begin to kind of observe yourself and learn about yourself, um, and develop that kind of loving kindness we talked about. It's so important in any practice. And I would say from there, try and connect to the emotional content. What are the real energies that you're carrying with you? Because there's no point having a practice and then really not having any awareness about who you are and what you're experiencing. So try and connect to the emotional content, and the emotions and the patterns that we're struggling with now, we probably always have done since we were like 3 years old. So they're not going away. So whatever practice you do, it needs to, bring you closer to your energetic karmic patterns, your emotional patterns, your behaviors, your state of mind, to help you, you know, create more awareness around what you're working with. And then your practice needs to help you focus in on those parts of yourself that are uncomfortable and they're not sitting in a peaceful way. From there, I would say have a physical practice. As we talked about nature, time in nature, we're physical beings, so we live in a body. So you can't just roll out of bed and expect to feel good, right? So it's not going to happen. So be physical, move, breathe, and then beyond that, I mean, there are a million things you can do, right? From yoga to tai chi to exercise to to joining any kind of spiritual group or community that will help you kind of develop. I think diet is important, to eat well, eat whole foods, stay away from processed foods, junk food. So you're minding your business, right? You're caring for your state of mind. You're caring for your body, what goes into it. Talked about what comes out your mouth, caring about that. You're caring about your community, your family. I think somebody once said, a Buddhist friend of mine, our basic practice is fire, right? Warmth. Yeah, just be a warm person. And like, give love, right? Even if you don't feel like it, just try and practice like being as loving as you can to everyone that you meet, because I would say, like, you don't know how close to the edge any of us are, right? So a little unkindness, yeah, it may push someone off the edge of the cliff here. So the least that you could do is just be kind to everyone, and then it's like you're developing this warmth and sense of connection with people, and it's surprising what response you'll get, if you, as a practice, like have a compassion practice, because you're really honoring your fire and your warmth of who you are, to relate to the world. So you can have all the yogas and Iron Man in the world, but if you don't have compassion, that's no practice. You can eat the best food, right? Be in the best physical shape, but if you're not connected to your emotional content, it's really not going to help you very much. So I think there are basic things we can do every day, but I think it's important to try and cultivate a practice that for you also has meaning and purpose, because what's meaningful for me and makes me feel good, it may not work for someone else. So I think we have to try things out and find what resonates, and find our communities that we feel there's a sense of connectivity and friendship and warmth, and maybe find maybe a teacher's a strong word, or a spiritual friend, or somebody who you feel can help you, can guide you, towards a good practice, and maybe to help you work through some of the places within you that are kind of no-go zones, right? Because if we don't have help from someone outside of ourselves, we're just not going to go there. We can kid ourselves and say, oh yeah, I've done the work, yeah, but we've only done it in our minds. We haven't actually done it anywhere else, so we haven't done it. And I think it's very, very difficult to see oneself, isn't it? So I would say, as part of a spiritual practice, like find someone who's been through it or been through a bit more than you and can help you. That's okay.
Fantastic. We need to wrap this up, but I want to ask you one last question.
Sure.
Which is, what fills you with hope and gratitude and optimism about the future these days?
I think that now is an amazing time for embracing this crisis and seeing it as an opportunity. And what gives me great hope is that so many people, especially from the younger generations, are looking to find ways in which they can help the world and help the planet and dedicate their lives to, cultivating a healthier, more sustainable world, less invested in consumerism and more invested in, caring for the natural world. And also I see a lot of young people looking back to more ancient traditions and drawing on those to find empowerment and to help their personal development and growth. So I think a combination of all of those things means that a lot of the old, orders deconstructing themselves, and I feel like a new order is giving birth to itself, which is, as I said, for kind of giving birth to a consciousness based much more on loving kindness and compassion and self-development, not from a point of view of developing the ego, but developing egolessness to create a world that's more sustainable and loving than the one that we inherited.
Great. And if someone watches this and decides they want to work with you, where can they find you?
Myamedicine.co.uk. Yeah, everything's on there, and we run sweat lodges on a lovely little farm called Filston Farm in Shoreham every third Saturday of the year, and I'm offering one-to-ones in Home at Primrose Hill in London 3 days a week, and we have some really fun retreats coming up in Mexico for a week in Oaxaca, Cerro Largo and San Agustinillo, and then later in the year in Sweden at Shambhala gatherings in September. So lots of fun things coming up, and hope to see you, Isabella, soon at one of those.
Definitely recommend the Sweden retreat. We were just on that one, really powerful, but also the ones at Filson Farm in Kent in the UK.
Yeah,
Really, really powerful work. So
we had a good time in Sweden. So thank you
yeah,
for coming.
you're welcome. Okay, thank you so much for being on the show, and that is it. Thank you.
Thanks, Isabella. Thank you so much. Have a great day. Talk to
Bye.
you soon. Bye.